When one Minnesota man adopted a black Labrador mix from the local shelter, he thought he would just be getting a cute companion. Yet in early 2019, the man discovered he adopted a hero after the dog ended up rescuing a nearby 87-year-old at risk of losing her life during a deadly polar vortex. Hello, wonderful people. I'm Gail Cruz from Wonderbot Animals. And here is Heroic Dog Rescues 87-year-old During Deadly Polar Vortex. In late January and early February of 2019, Minnesota and other states across the Midwest of the United States were hit with a deadly polar vortex, which is a low-pressure area in the North Pole that expands in the winter season and sends cold air and dangerous conditions south. The polar vortex caused the temperature in states across the Midwest to plummet well below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. The conditions in early 2019 have been so extreme that more than 20 people across the Midwest lost their lives because of the weather. Minnesota was one of the states hit hard during the polar vortex. It caused numerous school and local businesses to close, disrupted the U.S. Postal Service deliveries in 5 states, caused countless power outages, and even led to the cancellation of more than 25,000 flights. On January 28th, people across Minnesota were preparing for dangerous conditions. While it was already below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperatures were about to drop even further, and the conditions were expected to get even more dangerous than they already were. People across the state and much of the Midwest were warned to stay indoors and keep warm as best as possible, as it was the best way to stay safe. For those who spent too much time outside exposed to the elements, the risk was hypothermia and even death. On the frigid morning of January 28th, one Minnesota resident only planned to take his garbage out before heading straight back inside. According to Tim Kerfman from Alexandria, Minnesota, it was about 1 degrees Fahrenheit when he left his home that Monday morning. However, while taking the garbage out to the curb, his 4-year-old black Labrador mix named Midnight started acting strangely. As Kerfman was walking to the curb, Midnight's ears perked up and she started looking at her owner with an intense gaze. According to Kerfman, he had never seen Midnight make that expression in the 2 years since he had adopted her from a shelter. She had her ears perked up looking at me. She doesn't normally do that. Sometimes you get that feeling something's up, Kerfman told WCCO about his dog's strange behavior. Kerfman didn't know it at the time, but Midnight had sensed that a life was in danger. Since Kerfman felt something might be wrong, he let Midnight lead the way and followed her over to his elderly neighbor's house. When they got to a spot on the other side of the home, Midnight and Kerfman found 87-year-old Noreen lying in the snow. The 87-year-old was struggling in the snow after taking a fall and hadn't been able to get up on her own. According to Noreen, she had gone out earlier that morning to fill her bird feeder before the temperature dropped even further the following day. Noreen explained to Kerfman that she had been trying to fill up the bird feeder when the snow gave way under her boots and she got knocked to the ground. She managed to crawl over to the garbage and planned to pull herself up to her feet again, but there was nothing she could grab onto. She could not have gotten up because her gloves had gotten wet and she didn't have enough strength in her fingers to push herself up, Kerfman explained. Nothing in the garage to get a hold of and nothing in the corner to get up and get a hold of either. We figured she was out there at least a half an hour, said Kerfman. If she was out there for longer, Noreen could have potentially gotten hypothermia as her body was losing heat faster than it could produce. Noreen was also at risk of going into heart and respiratory failure and potentially dying. Thanks to Midnight, however, that didn't happen. However, it was a close call as Kerfman would never have seen Noreen lying on the ground without Midnight. According to Kerfman, the neighborhood was built in a way that he can't see the spot where Noreen was lying. On top of that, he is also legally blind. After finding Noreen laying on the ground, Kerfman lifted the 87-year-old up and brought her into his home. Once inside, he and his wife made sure she wasn't seriously injured and checked she didn't have frostbite. However, her hands were already blue, so they helped her warm up and gave her dry clothes. Noreen is now much better, but knows how close she came to losing her life. The 87-year-old told WCCO that Midnight is without a doubt the reason she is still alive today. "We've been very proud of her because it's not every dog that pays attention to things like this," said Kerfman.